Welcome to Awakening Streams, the podcast of One River Zen Meditation Center in Ottawa, Illinois. Hosted by Sensei Michael Brunner. Learn more, donate, and practice with us at oneriverzen.org.
It's important for us that we get a full glimpse of the vista of our karmic bind. Often we want to be oblivious to it, but when we're oblivious to it, it has a way of making itself known. The karmic bind starts off early for each of us. We begin with a little bit of karmic baggage, right? Perhaps who our parents are, or what our culture values, or just the community that we come into the world in. But then the fun starts. Yeah? We begin to experience pain and loss. And with each of these events, we begin to put up warning signs. Caution, pain, when we fall and skin our knee. Or caution, loss, when we're in a relationship that doesn't go well. And eventually we're ringed about by these signs. We actually begin to live a tenuous life surrounded by this border of fear and cautionary tales. And we begin to address them by actually reshaping ourselves. We form an identity to rise to the challenge of how to exist in this fear-shaped void that's really of our own making. And as time goes on, we begin to become even more sophisticated. We realize that one size doesn't fit all. And so we begin to fragment the self. And we begin to develop different personas. Sometimes we even find ready-made ones in the zeitgeist of our culture or our lab of the collective unconscious that we put on to model. These begin to seem very substantial over time. But unfortunately, they aren't all encompassing. So sometimes we realize that there's something left of the identities, so we reach out and pull things in to plug any gaps or to make them feel more substantial. And then there become winners and losers in our lives. People who we keep close, people who we push away, not for some altruistic reason, but because they don't suit the costume that we wear. We begin to create an even stronger karmic wave by our actions that are completely ungrounded in any present reality. In this sense, our actions are selfish, yeah? But we don't even know the self that created them. And all the constant costume changes only complicate all the matters. That which we call other projects onto us in a way that we make them feel more insecure, or more secure rather, in their identity. And then we counter-transfer in an attempt to reinforce the breach. It's a sort of war. You might say it's a war in your mind, but it's a war with real casualties. We become oblivious to the actual rhythm of our lives, and we instead live in an ideological morass. This is a dangerous place. When we begin to shape the self to address other, we create enemies out of huge swaths of existence in the service of an idea. Hate forms and deepens the divide that it was initially meant to address. This is the way of the world. This is the antithesis of the spiritual path. And it takes some kind of shock for us to see this at play, something that happens that challenges our reliance on the constructed self, or selves. Loss of a spouse, loss of a parent, loss of a job. Maybe our children move away. We realize that the house that the ego built isn't substantial and no longer fits. Then we begin the long, arduous work of peeling back the layers of the constructed self. We see all the accumulated karmic baggage trapped between the layers that the original boundaries were meant to hide. It's hard work. It's frightening work. Aside from feeling exposed and vulnerable, by the way, this is true in our original state. We have a sense of loss and a sense of fear as what we have tightly wound up comes apart. And we don't know who we are. There's a temptation as we do this work to stop the process. or to say, that's enough, I'm done, yeah, and we'll cling to a lighter form of self. Or God forbid, maybe we even revel in the completeness of our work. There's a case about this in the Shōyōroku. It's the 38th case. It begins, attention. Rinzai addressed the assembly saying, there is a true person of no rank. She is always leaving and entering the gates of your face. You beginners who have not yet witnessed her, look, look. Thereupon a young monk asked, how about this true woman of no rank? Rinzai got down from the seat and grabbed her. The monk hesitated, and Rinzai pushed her away, saying, this true woman of no rank, what a shit stick she is. I always wince when they say the bad words. Yeah, it's very rare in the Shōyōroku. I guess the King James Version of the Bible uses piss, and we're not far off. They're about 100 years apart in history, these translations. But the interesting thing is that this is the only appropriate word here. We begin to wonder, what's at play? Master Rinzai is present, and of course, he's the founder of the Rinzai School of Zen, which is still with us. We've been influenced greatly by it, even though we're in a Soto lineage. And Rinzai is talking about this true person of no rank. Who is this true person of no rank? Where would you meet her? Rinzai posits a subtle hint here. He says, she's always leaving and entering the gates of your face. Those caution signs that you put up to address past hurts, they're just signs, you know, right? You know you put them there. The personalities that you wear to project out into the conscious moment as boundaries are created by them. But you created the essence of it. What's there when they're gone? When there's nothing left to cling to, nothing left to defend, then what? Then outside is just an idea. There's nothing. And inside, there's also just an idea. Nothing, right? Then you find yourself free. Free to respond to what is present rather than some arbitrary boundary that you have to defend. This is your true original state. This is the liberation that Shakyamuni pointed to many years ago. I was speaking with a student about a case recently where he had a deep recognition that ultimately what we do matters. You say, hold on a second. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? But it actually took them working through a case to really actually see it, to experience it, to witness it. What you do ultimately is all there is. The ideas that you have are important in the sense, and only in the sense, that they guide your actions. If you see the imperatives of this moment reflected in the mirror of your ideology, you'll never actually be in fidelity with the needs of this moment. They're always going to be jaded. You have to see directly. And for this, you've got to consciously demote the army of constructed selves that you've assembled to create an egoic illusion of substantiality or separateness. What you do, everything you do, matters. Nothing is hidden. We only create a substantial idea of hidden or separate in a way to comfort ourselves that we can rest in the solitude of our ego and let our lives pass us by. Even when you reach this place where you recognize that everything you do matters, you've got to beware. Rinzai continues on. Thereupon the monk asked, how about this true woman of no rank? How about it indeed? Rinzai gets down from the seat and grabs her. Oh, didn't plan that, yeah? The monk hesitates, and Rinzai pushes her away, saying, this true woman of no rank, what a shit stick she is. Yeah. Bless you. If you think this is a once and for all activity that can be moved beyond, You've missed it. You have to focus on your attention, and you have to place it with intention as a constant practice. If you think, I've met the true woman of no rank, that I is extra, that I is merely the discarded remnants of past meals, it is us clinging to a spiritual achievement only to realize well and truly it's actually, for lack of a better term, shit. We have to let that go. We have to put it down. We have to be moved by what is present. That's the only way to experience wisdom. The only way to experience wisdom is to embody it. Constantly sweeping, constantly moving our attention with intention, uncovering what needs attention, and then being the medicine. There's a constant counter-argument to this practice that's set forth by an ego that's on its last legs, yeah? Ego is not going to give up. We've clung to this for a long time. We need a self. We need our boundaries. And I'll be honest with you, you're not going to get any arguments from me. In a sense, that's very true. But here's the thing. The skillfully and attentively created self is manifest based on the needs of the moment and then discarded. Only when you recognize who the master is and the fact that you're creating these selves to address something and then letting it go are you actually manifesting well. If it lingers even for a moment, oof, ooh, that smell, yeah? So what's the litmus test? How are we aware of it? Just take a look back at the karmic wave you're creating. Yeah? If it's one of cyclical pain and suffering, things that constantly repeat themselves, if you constantly find yourself present with others who fall into the same patterns or ideological habits, problem's not out there. You better sweep. If you're leaving a string of broken hearts and others' pain behind you in some rearview mirror, you better sweep. We can get to a place in our practice where we feel the issue is the people who surround us. I really want this to sink in. This is very important, all right? Because there is no way or no path unless you have this basic understanding. There's no way of practice unless you can see this very clearly. It's not outside. It's never outside. It's never someone else's fault. Never. If you can't get here, then there's no way to tread the way. There's no way to tread the path. If you awaken this sense of impotence, then you'll never meet the true master. The woman of no rank will never manifest, and there'll be no medicine. It's tempting for us to want to abscond from the throne of our true self once we've encountered it, that we want to cling to something that we consider to be more substantial, to not want to walk into suffering, to somehow be insulated from it. But it won't do. It won't do. You say, oh, it's just it's just a tiny little thing. Yeah. It's just this created self that I've wound around this political ideology. Of course, it's innocuous. It's not innocuous. It's as far away from east as from west. If when light hits water, it refracts ever so slightly. If you open your eyes underwater and you try to act out on the objects that are around you, you're going to notice it. It's very difficult to do. You can't judge depth. You can't see the richness of what's there. And by the way, you can't even bear to keep your eyes very open very long in that environment. That's what these clinging to notions of self do. They bend the light, so we're never able to see clearly and be effective. Dogen talks about this in Tenzo Kyokan, Instructions for the Cook. We're actually doing a study on that right now as a Sangha. It's a wonderful text. Towards a couple paragraphs in, about 2/3 of the way through, Dogen talks about an encounter he had with a cook at a Chinese monastery. He says, when this mountain monk, I, Dogen, was at Tiantong Monastery, The position of Tenzo, or the position of cook, was held by Yong of the same province as the monastery. Once, after the midday meal, I was passing through the east corridor on my way to the Chaoran room, where my teacher Myozen was being nursed. He had taken ill. When I saw the cook in front of the Buddha hall, airing mushrooms. He carried a bamboo staff in his hand, but he had no hat on his head. The sun was hot. The ground tiles were hot, and sweat streamed over him as he worked diligently to dry the mushrooms, and he was suffering quite a bit. With his backbone bent like a bow and his shaggy eyebrows, he resembled a crane. This is the Tenzo, by the way. The Tenzo is a person of some rank in a monastery, generally up there, right up there next to the abbot. So for the Tenzo to be engaged in this activity in Dogen's mind seemed very futile. The image of the cook is striking. There's a man bent by years of practice, unwavering in his work, standing in the heat, fully present. There's no distraction. There's no hesitation. Only the wholehearted offering of himself to the task that is manifest before him. There's no resentment here. This isn't a suffering born of resentment to the state that he's in. He's accepted it as it presents itself. No suffering of complaint. This is the suffering of practice. He was drying his own self in that sun. The body was bearing the weight of commitment. Self cast aside in the work of nourishing others. The sweat that streams over him is not wasted effort. It's the expression of his vow. And this is the true posture of practice. The world bends and moves, yet he stands where he must, doing the work that needs to be done. This is what it means to be actualized by the Dharma. Dogen saw this and was moved, and so he approached the monk. And he said, "What is your Dharma age?" And he said, 68 years. Dogen said, "Why would you not employ postulants or laborers?" What the monk says next is extremely profound. He says, "They're not me. This isn't ego. This isn't pride or control. It's the deep recognition that our practice cannot be delegated. When we adopt an ideological stance or position, or when we fall into the trap of the egoic self, we believe somehow that the role itself is the activity that's going to be the medicine. There's no such thing. You can't abscond. No one can step into your shoes and walk the path for you. No one can sit zazen for you. No one else can take up the work of the moment as it presents itself in your place. There's no one else to do it. The cook doesn't look for someone else to bear his burden, as we shouldn't either. We need to meet it fully. It's a vital responsibility in this that's set forth in this teaching. If it's before you, it's yours to take up. The cook doesn't believe he's superior to any postulant or laborer. He's not higher or lower than any task. He simply sees the truth. The work is his and his alone. In this way, the cook embodies the heart of practice. No grasping, no resistance, nowhere to hide. We're in the ring now. This is our life, and what's presented to us has to be addressed. There's no turning away. There's no rank to protect you. Once we get to that basic place, that basic truth, setting aside everything else, we witness that true woman of no rank. You can see it now, flowing out of the gates of your eyes and back in as well. But do it today. Take that first step forward. Witness that woman of true rank and be the compassion required in this moment.
Thank you for joining us. If this podcast was meaningful for you and supported your practice, please give us a hand by visiting us at oneriverzen.org today.